In a world obsessed with intelligence, we rarely stop to question its opposite. We praise brilliance, celebrate genius, and surround ourselves with the illusion that the smart will always rise, while the foolish are left behind. But what if the truth were darker? What if the danger wasn't in stupidity itself, but in how it hides, spreads, and infects the very systems we depend on? What if the real threat to power isn't your enemy, but the idiot who thinks he's helping? Niccolò Machiavelli understood this. Long before the modern age, he lived in courts where stupidity wasn't just a disadvantage. It was a weapon, a liability, and often a contagion. He observed rulers fall not from great betrayals, but from foolish alliances. He saw cities crumble not through evil, but through ignorance, parading as loyalty, and he learned that the stupid do not simply fail on their own. They bring others down with them. We're taught to pity the stupid, but Machiavelli would warn you to fear them, because stupidity, unlike malice, doesn't require intention, it doesn't require strategy, and it doesn't require self-awareness. The stupid are often unaware of their damage, and that's precisely what makes them so dangerous. There is a kind of person who consistently harms others and themselves, not out of greed, not out of hate, but out of sheer blindness to consequence, and no amount of education, experience, or correction seems to cure them. They act, and destruction follows. They advise, and failure spreads. They speak, and clarity dies. These people exist in every institution, every empire, every boardroom, every army. Machiavelli didn't need a scientific theory of stupidity to understand its power. He simply watched how it operated, who it elevated, who it destroyed, and how it infected even the most brilliant minds. He wrote, "Men in general judge more by the eyes than by the hands, for all can see, but few can touch." And in that he revealed something deeper, that stupidity often wears the costume of wisdom. It performs intelligence without possessing it. It copies the posture of strength, the tone of certainty, the vocabulary of logic. But when tested, it collapses, and yet we reward it. Again and again, we promote the confident fool because he speaks louder than the cautious thinker. We listen to the reckless optimist because he's more entertaining than the careful analyst. We follow the enthusiastic idiot because he makes us feel good, even as he leads us over a cliff. Machiavelli would not be shocked by this. He would expect it. He would say, "The vulgar crowd is always taken by appearances, and the stupid more than anyone are masters of appearances. They mistake visibility for truth, noise for insight, certainty for accuracy, and in a democracy, a court or a company, where perception matters more than depth, this kind of stupidity doesn't just survive, it thrives." But the most chilling truth isn't that stupid people rise, it's that smart people let them, because intelligence, when paired with cowardice, becomes complicity. The intelligent man who says nothing as stupidity spreads is more dangerous than the fool himself. Machiavelli observed, "The prince who does not recognize evils when they arise is not truly wise," and many today are wise in theory, but passive in practice. They see the damage, they watch the fool mislead, but they say nothing, because it's easier to nod and blend in than to confront and risk. And so the stupid win, not by strategy, but by silence, by apathy, by the complicity of those who should have known better. If stupidity was simply a lack of intelligence, it would be easy to fix. We'd educate it, we'd reason with it, we'd correct it. But Machiavelli knew the truth. Stupidity is not merely a mental deficiency, it's a behavioral pattern, a refusal to learn, a resistance to reflection, a loyalty not to truth, but to one's own ego. And so the stupid remain stupid, not by accident, but by choice. They surround themselves with other fools, because wisdom threatens them. They avoid questions, because questions expose their shallowness. They interrupt, because silence makes them insecure. They pretend to know, because they fear being seen. And worst of all, they believe they're smart. Machiavelli would have understood this well. He would have called it the most dangerous illusion of all. the man who is wrong and certain, the man who acts with confidence, but no clarity, the man who believes his good intentions, excuse his bad results. He would not pity this man. He would guard against it, and he would advise you to do the same, because stupidity is not neutral. It's not harmless. It is a political force, an economic weight, a social toxin. It makes war when peace was possible. It spends when saving was wiser. It speaks when silence was power. And it justifies itself with hollow phrases. I meant well. I didn't know. I was trying to help. But the damage is done all the same. And while we excuse it, while we normalize it, while we defend it out of politeness or fear, it grows. Machiavelli once wrote, "He who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived." The same applies here. The stupid will always find an audience willing to listen, because stupid ideas are easy, comforting, and require no sacrifice. They promise the world without cost, answers without questions, virtue without discipline, and so they spread. And those who challenge them, they are labeled arrogant, elitist, out of touch. But Machiavelli would say, better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. And in this context, it means better to be hated for telling the truth than loved for entertaining a lie. You do not fix stupidity by embracing it. You do not defeat it by being gentle with it. You outmaneuver it. You contain it. And when necessary, you isolate it. Because if left unchecked, the stupid will not simply fail. They will bring you down with them. And by the time you realize it, it will be too late. They smile, they speak, they share their opinions with the confidence of emperors, but behind their eyes is no strategy, no depth, no awareness of consequence. Just the noise of their own certainty echoing in a hollow mind. These are not evil men, they are not villains in the traditional sense, but make no mistake, they are dangerous. Because stupid people don't know they're stupid. And more critically, they don't know what they don't know. That is the hidden engine of their destruction. Their ignorance is not passive, it is active. It moves, it speaks, it votes, it commands, it advises. And in doing so, it infects everything around it with bad decisions backed by good intentions. Machiavelli saw this dynamic in the courts of power. He watched weak rulers take counsel from flattering fools, not out of trust, but out of convenience. The fool doesn't challenge the ruler, he reassures him. He confirms his biases. He says what the ruler wants to hear, not what he needs to hear. And in that false comfort, the downfall begins. The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler, Machiavelli wrote, is to look at the men he has around him, and too often, those men are not chosen for wisdom, but for obedience, for smiles, for loyalty without challenge. Stupidity thrives in environments where dissent is punished and truth is optional. Now imagine this not just in palaces, but in modern boardrooms, in political campaigns, in social media feeds. Everywhere you look, the loudest voices are not the wisest but the boldest, the ones who speak with force even when speaking nonsense. And the masses follow, not because the message is true but because it's easy to digest. Machiavelli warned us, the vulgar crowd is always taken by appearances, and in an age of optics, the stupid have mastered the art of appearing intelligent. They memorize phrases, they mimic confidence, they use big words without understanding them, they talk in circles and call it insight, they rush to respond but never to reflect. And most terrifying of all, they reproduce, not just biologically, but ideologically. They teach, they influence, they manage, they lead. And so the stupidity that once lived in isolation now becomes systemic, institutional, embedded in rules, in schools, in companies, in governments. It's not just individuals, it's processes now, policies, frameworks, built on the shaky foundation of foolish thinking. The fool builds systems that punish wisdom and reward conformity. He creates a world where asking dangerous questions is offensive and following bad orders is safe. He teaches others to stay in line, not because it's right but because it's easy. And slowly, subtly, stupidity becomes the norm, not the exception. You start hearing phrases like, "That's just how it's done," or "Don't overthink it," or "Be realistic." These are not statements of intelligence. These are the war cries of the complacent, the slogans of those who've surrendered thought for comfort. And yet because stupid ideas don't need evidence, they need repetition. A simple phrase, said enough times, becomes law, even if it's false, even if it's harmful, even if it's absurd. The intelligent man, on the other hand, hesitates. He reflects. He questions his own thoughts before speaking, and in doing so he appears less confident, less sure, not because he's weak, but because he understands the complexity of truth. But the crowd doesn't reward complexity. It rewards clarity, or the illusion of it. This is the paradox Machiavelli grasped, that in politics and in life, the truth often loses to the lie that sounds better. He didn't glorify this. He didn't celebrate it. He simply warned us, understand it, or be destroyed by it. So how do stupid people rise? They move fast. They speak first. They create confusion, then fill the void with answers. Answers that feel good even if they're wrong. And when their ideas fail, they don't take responsibility. They blame. They point fingers. They rewrite the narrative. And because they lack self-awareness, they don't learn. They repeat the same mistakes, louder each time. They call it consistency. But in reality, it's stagnation disguised as confidence. Machiavelli would tell you, watch carefully. The stupid man surrounds himself with noise. But listen, not to the volume of his speech. Listen to the cost of his words. What does his advice destroy? What does his leadership produce? Who benefits from his decisions? And who suffers? Because stupidity isn't neutral. It has consequences, and those consequences often fall hardest on the innocent. The employees who follow terrible directives, the soldiers who die for poorly planned strategies, the citizens who pay for the mistakes of loud, incompetent leaders. And the tragedy, the stupid man never sees the damage. He walks away untouched, convinced he was right, because in his mind, the outcome doesn't matter. Only the illusion of control does. He confuses leadership with attention, influence with noise, power with popularity, and so he keeps climbing until someone smarter stops him, or until everything collapses. Machiavelli understood this dynamic, not just as a scholar, but as a survivor. He lived in a world where mistakes weren't measured in embarrassment, but in exile or death. And in that world, stupidity was more than a weakness. It was a threat, a ticking bomb in the room, a disease in the bloodstream of power. And today it's more contagious than ever. They don't come with warning signs. No alarms ring when they speak. In fact, most stupid people enter with charm. They smile. They offer help. They speak of good intentions. And yet, when they leave, things are worse. Not dramatically, not immediately, but steadily, consistently worse. This is the hidden signature of stupidity. Not the sudden explosion of chaos, but the quiet erosion of order. One bad decision at a time, one misjudged hire, one reckless policy, one broken trust. And the worst part, they don't even realize it. They think they're fixing things. Niccolò Machiavelli would call this the tragedy of mistaken virtue. When a fool believes he is wise, when a threat believes he is a savior, when destruction disguises itself as kindness. Because stupidity, at its core, lacks reflection. It moves quickly, but without direction. It reacts, but never studies. It speaks, but never listens. And in that absence of reflection, power becomes dangerous. Machiavelli once observed that the fortune of rulers often depends not on virtue, but on the quality of those they surround themselves with. And those who surround themselves with stupidity out of comfort, out of ignorance, or out of fear, are doomed. It is tempting to think stupidity only exists outside of power, that rulers are wise and those beneath them are flawed. But Machiavelli, in his cold precision, made no such assumption. He knew that stupidity doesn't climb power. It is power when left unchecked. The stupid do not need to outsmart the smart. They simply need to be louder, faster, and more certain. And when surrounded by the timid or the tired, they win by exhaustion. The intelligent mind asks, is this true? The stupid mind asks, does this sound good? And society, flooded by noise and overstimulation, often answers to the latter. So the stupid rise not by proving themselves right, but by making the smart seem unsure. In a world that rewards sound bites over substance, clarity over complexity, it is the stupid who shine. They have no nuance, no caution, no hesitation, and in the moment, that feels like strength. But it's not strength, it's blindness masquerading as boldness. And the damage is cumulative. One stupid person in a conversation is an annoyance. One stupid person in a leadership role is a liability. But a system that empowers the stupid, that teaches others to imitate them, to appease them, to protect them, is a catastrophe. It creates a new kind of tyranny, not the tyranny of cruelty, but the tyranny of incompetence, where nothing works, but no one knows why, where bad ideas become policies, where fear of offending the fool becomes greater than the desire to stop him, and so the cycle deepens. The stupid promote the stupid. They reject criticism as arrogance. They frame intelligence as elitism. They mistake caution for weakness and wisdom for overthinking. They build echo chambers where no challenge is allowed, where questions are threats, where data is inconvenient, where confidence becomes a shield against accountability. And they surround themselves with loyal mediocrity, because excellence threatens them, insight threatens them, truth threatens them. Machiavelli would not be surprised. He saw that weakness in rulers who silenced their critics, who banished their thinkers, who feared the wise more than the wicked, because the wise expose incompetence, not with insults, but with outcomes, with results that cannot be denied. And this is where the war truly begins, not between good and evil, but between competence and noise. You've seen it, the loud boss who blames everyone but himself, the co-worker who insists on his way despite constant failure, the politician who smiles while everything burns. They do not improve, but they do not leave, because in a world that fears confrontation, stupidity is allowed to stay. It becomes institutional. It gets written into handbooks, taught in training, reinforced in slogans, and over time it becomes the standard, until mediocrity is not the floor, but the ceiling, until those who try to rise above it are pulled back down, not by malice but by sheer ignorance, until the system itself punishes excellence and protects failure. Machiavelli understood that power is perception, and the stupid are masters of perception. They just have no substance to match it, and yet that perception fools many, because it is easier to follow a loud fool than to wrestle with a quiet truth. And this brings us to the silent accomplices, the intelligent who say nothing, the wise who choose comfort over confrontation, the capable who let the incapable lead. They tell themselves it's not worth the fight, that it's just a job, that the system can't change, and so they watch in silence as fools dictate strategy, as error becomes policy, as incompetence spreads. Machiavelli would not excuse them. He would name them as complicit, because silence is not neutral. In the presence of stupidity, silence is a gift to the wrong side. He wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, when one of the two must be lacking, and in this case, better to be feared for speaking the truth than loved for letting the lie continue, because stupidity doesn't stop itself. It must be stopped, not with rage, not with violence, but with the cold, unflinching force of clarity, of exposure, of action. The stupid must be outmaneuvered, not debated, not educated, not converted, outmaneuvered. They do not change, they do not learn, they only double down. So don't argue, don't explain, move around them, Silence them with results. Crush them with excellence. Let your precision be louder than their noise. And when they finally fall, because they always do, let history record not that you tolerated them, but that you outlasted them. You can hear them before you see them. Their words arrive ahead of their actions, loud, certain, empty. They declare things that feel powerful, but upon inspection, collapse like smoke. And yet, people listen. Crowds nod. Applause follows. Not because the words are wise, but because they are easy. This is the secret weapon of the stupid. Simplicity without substance. They offer answers in a world full of complex problems. And because people are tired, confused, overwhelmed, they accept them. A lie that feels good will always outpace a truth that feels hard. Machiavelli saw this play out across courts and councils, where the clever idiot outmaneuvered the hesitant sage. He did not find this surprising. He found it predictable. The crowd does not crave wisdom. It craves certainty, and certainty, he warned, is the easiest mask a fool can wear. We live in an age where access to information has never been greater, and yet stupidity has never been louder. Why? Because stupidity doesn't need facts. It only needs repetition. Say it enough times. Say it with confidence. Make it rhyme. Wrap it in emotion. And soon, what was once absurd becomes common sense. The stupid understand this, even if only instinctively. They know how to sound right even when they are catastrophically wrong. They speak in absolutes. They avoid nuance. They mock complexity. And in doing so, they build a kind of charisma, not rooted in truth, but in illusion. And this illusion becomes dangerous when it spreads, because the stupid are not just wrong. They are influential, and the more they speak, the more they gather followers who admire their confidence, not realizing it's a bluff. This is how empires fall, not from outside attacks, but from the elevation of the incompetent. Machiavelli wrote, "A prince who is not wise himself cannot be wisely advised." What he meant was simple. A fool in charge filters all counsel through ignorance. Even the wisest advisors become useless if the ruler cannot recognize wisdom. Now apply this to modern leadership, corporate, political, social. How often have you seen brilliance ignored because it didn't flatter the ego of someone higher up? How often have the loudest, least qualified people shaped the direction of a team, a company, a country? And when it fails, when the plans collapse, what do the stupid do? They rewrite history. They shift blame. They weaponize confusion. You'll hear them say no one could have known, or we did our best, or it wasn't my fault. And because their stupidity is dressed in emotion, many believe them. But Machiavelli would see through them. He understood that those who fail to govern themselves will never govern others. And this is what separates the merely ignorant from the truly dangerous. The dangerous fool is not someone who lacks knowledge. He's someone who lacks restraint, who cannot admit when he is wrong, who doubles down, again and again dragging others into the pit with him. And he never pays the price. That's the cruel irony. In politics, the stupid often retire with pensions. In business, they get golden parachutes. In culture, they're forgiven and forgot. It is the people below them, the thinkers, the builders, the silent executors, who suffer the consequences. So what is to be done? Machiavelli wouldn't offer a comforting answer. He would offer a useful one. You do not debate fools. You do not elevate them by acknowledging their nonsense. You create systems that limit their reach. You remove their audience. You strip them of the illusion of authority. You isolate the virus before it spreads. And this requires courage, because fools, when cornered, become loud. They become vicious. They claim persecution. They shout, "I'm being silenced," as if silence were oppression and not protection. For the rest of us, let them shout, let them wail, let them cry censorship. Your job is not to indulge their noise. Your job is to protect what matters. Clarity, results, truth. Machiavelli wrote, "It is better to act and repent than not to act and regret." This is not a license for recklessness. It's a call to courage. to act when silence enables stupidity, to move even if the cost is temporary discomfort, to risk offense in the pursuit of long-term order, because left alone, stupidity metastasizes. It moves into decision-making rooms. It grows in environments of politeness and fear. And soon, those who once whispered foolish ideas now command others to obey them. And they do, out of fear, out of fatigue, out of habit. This is not just a failure of intelligence. It is a failure of will. The smart know what must be done, but they hesitate. They hope the problem will resolve itself. It won't. Stupidity does not go quietly. It must be pushed, contained, redirected, neutralized, and sometimes ignored entirely, because not every fool needs an answer. Some only need to be bypassed. That is strategy. It is not glorious. It is not loud, but it is effective. The smart, if they wish to endure, must learn this. Not every battle is worth fighting, but the war against chaos, against incompetence, against the decay of standards, is always worth winning. And it is won, not through speeches, but through action, through creating things that work while others talk, through making decisions that hold while others collapse, through building lives, teams and systems that do not depend on the approval of fools. And when people ask why you're quiet, why you didn't clap, why you didn't join the circus, let your results speak. Let your silence say what your words do not need to. Let your discipline make the noise, because in the end, Machiavelli's advice is clear. The vulgar crowd is always taken by appearances. So be the exception. See beyond the show. Speak only when speech advances power, and when it doesn't, say nothing at all.
They will call you cold, arrogant, unapproachable. They will say you think you're better than everyone else, and maybe you are, but that's not the point. The point is, they'll resent your silence, not because it's rude, but because it makes them feel exposed. This is the effect strategic restraint has on the foolish. When you don't match their energy, when you don't feed their noise, when you don't give them the reaction they crave, they begin to crumble, not visibly at first, but slowly, internally. Their confidence begins to rot. Stupid people depend on validation. It is the fuel for their false certainty. Take it away, and they start to spiral. They repeat themselves more. They get louder, they press harder, and all you've done is remain still. Machiavelli would say, "You've already won," because when a fool is forced to face silence, he begins to speak against himself. He reveals the gaps in his logic. He exposes the weakness of his ideas. He confesses things he didn't mean to, not through interrogation, through discomfort. And that is your leverage. The intelligent person speaks when it's necessary. The stupid person speaks when it's comfortable. And the moment you remove that comfort, their illusion begins to fade. This is why your restraint is not just a tactic. It's a weapon. It makes them guess what you're thinking. It makes them question their certainty. It forces them to play against a ghost they cannot predict. And in this way, silence becomes dominance. This is not about being better. This is about being smarter. And smarter doesn't mean louder. It means less exposed, less reactive, less dependent on being seen. Because the moment you need attention, you've already lost control. The stupid crave attention, not because they want influence, but because they fear invisibility. To them, being unnoticed feels like being nothing. So they speak and post and perform, not to contribute, but to exist. Machiavelli understood that power is not always visible, that influence does not announce itself, that the strongest are often the most silent. He wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." And the fool, he lives entirely in appearance. He curates a life of noise, hoping no one ever checks what lies behind it. But the wise man doesn't need appearance. He needs advantage, and that advantage comes from holding more than you show. So while the world shouts, while the stupid fill every space with declarations, you do something far more dangerous. You watch, you listen, you wait, because while they are busy being seen, you are becoming prepared. This is the discipline they cannot understand. The patience to strike at the right moment, not every moment. The restraint to let others talk themselves into traps you never had to set. Fools rush into every conversation, every argument, every arena. They think showing up is winning, but Machiavelli would tell you, it's not the appearance of action that matters, it's its effect. And often, the most powerful effect comes from letting your opponent believe he's winning, letting him overextend, letting him reveal everything, while you reveal nothing. This isn't cowardice, it's control. And control to the stupid looks like mystery. To them, your silence is suspicious. Your discipline is arrogance. Your calm is a threat, because it reflects back everything they lack. You are not their enemy. You are their mirror, and they hate what they see. So they attack, not because you've done something wrong, but because you've made them feel small, insecure, irrelevant, and in their panic, they try to provoke a reaction. Don't give it to them. To respond is to validate them. To argue is to legitimize them. To explain is to lower yourself to their level, and that is what they want. They want you in the mud, because it's the only place they know how to fight. Machiavelli knew this well. He didn't advise leaders to be loud. He advised them to be feared. And fear doesn't come from shouting. It comes from presence, from mystery, from silence that suggests calculation, not ignorance. And in that silence, your power grows. Because while the stupid are spending their energy trying to be heard, you are reserving yours to be effective. And eventually effectiveness always outlasts noise. So let them mock you. Let them gossip. Let them guess. You do not need to defend your intelligence. You need only to use it. Because they may win moments, applause, attention, appearances. But you are not playing for moments. You are playing for position. And position, real, lasting, quiet power is not granted. It is built in shadows, in stillness, in silence. They will remember you by what you didn't say, by the silence you held while they ranted, by the pause you let stretch while they bragged, by the moment you looked but didn't speak and changed the direction of the room without lifting a finger. This is the final power of silence, not just as a tactic, not just as a weapon, but as identity. In a world ruled by noise, the silent man is not just different, he is dangerous. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He lived among schemers, flatterers, betrayers, but it was never the loudest who were most feared. It was the quiet ones, the ones who didn't declare loyalty, but displayed results, the ones who didn't react, but reshaped outcomes in silence. He understood that words create expectation, and silence creates tension, and tension is leverage. That is why the most powerful leaders are not the most vocal, but the most precise. They speak like snipers, not machine guns. They do not compete for the spotlight, because the spotlight follows them. It waits, it listens, because when they speak, it matters. You must become this man, not because it is easy, but because anything less is weakness. You are not here to be liked. You are not here to entertain. You are not here to outtalk fools on their battlefield. You are here to win, quietly, strategically, permanent. Machiavelli warned, the promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. In other words, speech is dangerous. It binds you. It limits you. It exposes you. But silence is freedom. Silence is adaptability. Silence is survival. Let others run their mouths. Let them post every thought, react to every comment, explain every move. They will exhaust themselves long before they touch real power, because true power does not come from talking. It comes from knowing when not to. And that knowing, that's what separates the strategist from the fool. The fool needs attention to feel alive. You need clarity to build your legacy. The fool performs for approval. You position in silence and act only when the outcome is secure. The fool debates. You decide. The fool declares. You deliver, and when all is said and done, when their noise fades, when their certainty collapses under scrutiny, your silence will still hold, not as absence, but as proof. Proof that you understood the deeper game. Proof that while they were chasing applause, you were chasing position. Proof that while they were seen, you were building what cannot be ignored. This is not a style. This is not a phase. This is your edge. In meetings, speak last. In arguments, say less. In strategy, never reveal the whole plan. And when in doubt, observe, because in a world addicted to self-expression, the man who controls his voice controls his fate. Machiavelli wrote, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, because it belongs to few to be able to see. Let them see what you choose. Let them feel what you never had to say. Let them wonder what your silence means, until the truth arrives, fully formed in action they never saw coming. You are not here to be understood. You are here to be respected, and respect does not come from explanation. It comes from restraint. So do not announce your moves. Let them echo in your wake. Do not defend your position. Let your outcomes make the argument. Do not expose your strategy. Let your silence drive them mad, because that is the ultimate game. Not to speak power, but to become it. So when you walk into a room, walk with gravity. When you speak, speak with purpose. And when you choose silence, make it so sharp, they bleed trying to interpret it. You do not need their approval. You need their hesitation. You need the pause in their voice when they see you. You need the second thought before they challenge you. You need the quiet respect of a man they cannot read, because that man wins, not by luck, not by charm, but by discipline, by silence, by staying just outside the noise until the moment he moves, and everything changes. That is Machiavellian silence. It is not emptiness. It is pressure. It is positioning. It is power. And the stupid, they will never understand it, which is why they lose. If you've made it this far, it's because something in you is already shifting. A part of you has stopped chasing noise. A part of you is done explaining yourself to those who never listened in the first place. You've started to realize that clarity doesn't come from speaking more, but from needing less. And maybe now you see what Machiavelli saw long ago, that to protect your mind, your mission, your peace, you must choose silence, even when it costs you comfort. So tell me in the comments, are you ready to be ignored, doubted, even mocked, just to stay aligned with your own power? Are you ready to be underestimated in public so you can be unbeatable in private? If this message struck something deep, if it helped you see through the noise, type in the comments, "I choose silence." Let's see who's ready to walk this path, not loudly but strategically, not to be seen, but to win. And whatever you do, don't stop here. The next video matters more than you think. It's waiting for you. I'll see you there.